I've just got this new role as an IT director, and the CIO wants me to assess the help desk and work out how many people we need. How would you go about doing it? And I was like, there are these formulas, but they don't really work. I said, if I was tasked with that, the first thing I would do would be find out what the support desk are doing, find out what is most of their support tickets, fix those support tickets so that those support issues don't happen, then work with your support team and see what can be automated, fix all of your problems, and then you'll have an idea of what the right size your support desk actually needs to be. Because otherwise, if you don't fix
We're
those
just
problems,
really diving
your
into the
support
content here.
yeah, if you don't fix those problems, the support desk will never be big enough.
Yeah,
Because the problems will just get worse.
In my opinion, too, one way to sort of do that in steps, because I think in small organizations, you can't just fix all of those problems in order and then figure it out. In a larger organization where changes might take longer, like if you build a roadmap that shows when each one of those things is going to be fixed and stick to that roadmap, then you can sort of like measure it at each stage. Like at this stage, we need X number of people. At this stage, we need X number of people. And at larger organizations, they're fine using contractors for T0, T1 support. So like, you could potentially like hire interim.
And they've managed service providers, etc. Anyway, I think we got started already. We keep doing this. Let's do it back, do it in reverse. And welcome to another episode of SaaS Showdown. Here we are again. I am Colin McCarthy, joined again with...
I'm Rose Layton. Colin, you dropped the hello at the beginning of that.
I did?
Yeah, you just said, and welcome.
But isn't the hello implied in this day and age?
It hasn't been applied in the last, what are we at? 24 episodes.
Yeah, I don't know. Whoever, where's the continuity person?
Yeah.
Anyway, it'll all be fixed. Hello, everyone. It will all be fixed in post-production. Here we are again, talking about SaaS, SaaS applications, SaaS ops. Let's have a showdown. We've had a lot of discussions this series on SaaS pricing, SaaS security, outages, and of course, unfortunately, layoffs, which do seem to be continuing inside the industry, which made us have that discussion. How big should your IT department or your IT support department be? Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
I know you and I, Rose, have talked about this a number of times.
We have
and our own opinions.
We've definitely interviewed many of our fellow colleagues about it in various capacities. And I think like holistically, we're talking about like the kind of thing that we're talking about can be applied to many IT teams, or like many sub teams within IT. It doesn't have to be just the support org. Because I think one of the interesting parts about being in IT is that you're always sort of in a support role, even when you're not. Would you agree with that, Colin?
I would hope. I hope you're supporting something. You might not be supporting end users, but you're probably supporting an application or a system which behind it has end users. Right. And there will be times, regardless of your level of responsibility, that you'll have to engage with end users and support them.
And when the CEO comes to you and says, "Hey, I have a problem," you don't generally just tell him to put in a ticket.
No, but if it's what's the saying? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if that's their policy, then yes, they should submit a ticket.
So let's start with some numbers just to like kick things off. So
ratios, yes.
Well, yeah. So I've worked at I guess like three major IT. In three major IT departments, and I would say they all had fairly different support ratios. One of them had a ratio that was 75-1. So 75 end users to one support person. Another one, and that was an organization of approximately 600 people. Another one was an organization of, when you counted the contractors, they were 12,000. And they had a support organization of 15.
Okay.
And then another organization, approximately 600 people, and the support team is 6 people. So 100,
So
100 to 1.
that's one
Yeah, so we had
hundred to
75
one.
to 1,
Right.
about 1,000 to 1, 800 to 1, and 100 to 1. So
Right. So we've already shown that there is no hard rule. There is no international standard
certainly no one
of
is following an
I.
international standard if there is one.
No. There is no IEEE standard for IT support personnel to end
Yeah.
users, and obviously there's a range of support personnel, like how many first line, how many second, third, how many IT managers, how many directors, VPs, CIOs you need, and your whole pyramid
You could be like Meta and just throw
of
out all your
support
managers.
structure. Yeah,
We don't need
yeah,
those.
could do. Everybody's first line, and obviously different industries like that. One that was it 1,000 to 1? You said,
Yeah.
yeah. Depending on what those 1,000 end users are doing, um, you know, like if you're when I used to work for CompuServe way back in the day, when people had dial-up internet, I worked on the support desk.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say CompuServe. I don't know how many customers it had, but there was 200 of us. Excuse me. About 200 on the desk at a time in our call center, probably 3 shifts a day, maybe.
Supporting how
Um,
many?
you know, I don't know, but it's probably hundreds of thousands. Because yes, you do have a user base, but it's not everybody, having an issue at a time. And also, there's that expectation of, SLA. People would stay on the phone for 3 to 5, 10 minutes to get through to a support person, to have their issue resolved.
Mm-hmm.
Large companies might have 5,000 people in a building, and they'll have a tech bar, and there might be 10 guys working on the tech bar, or 5 guys working in the tech bar as IT support. And if there is a major problem, people will have to wait. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I have seen that in some organizations. There will be a bunch of people standing around waiting to be seen at the tech bar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, when I got
there's
started at a university help desk, like we had just basically a rotating staff, right? Because they're staffed partially by students. And like at any given time, there were 7 or 8 students and 3 staff members at least. And we were staffed from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So, you know, just a really wide breadth of things. And that's students, faculty, and staff at the college. So, um,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm assuming people, the students were expecting to wait. Somebody was not going to pick up the phone on the first ring and say, "Oh my God, tell me, what your IT problem is. We'll quickly
Well, and
solve
it was
it." It
it
was
was
like,
sort of a courtesy in a lot of ways, because like the difference between supporting students and supporting like employees is that employees generally are working on employee or like organization issued equipment, and students are not. And so when we were helping students, like there's only so much you can do for somebody who's spilled a glass of wine on their laptop. Um, so we would do our best for them, but like it wasn't it wasn't always a problem that we could solve. So like, yeah, if they were having an issue getting on the Wi-Fi, we could help them out. But like, some of the hardware issues that you
right,
would normally have to deal with for employees, you don't have to deal with
yes,
students.
right. So the size of your IT team does depend on what you're
Mm-hmm.
supporting and how you're supporting it.
Yeah,
So
so I guess like Colin, what would you say are the major factors for figuring out how many people you need on your team?
so
So we've talked about what you're supporting, right? Which is hardware and
what you're
software.
supporting, I think it. So I've gone through this process organically where I've grown a team, where I started at a company and I was the first full-time IT support person, and there was 60 people. And then it
It
grew
seems
to
like a fun
being,
job. I'd like to do that someday.
it was very enjoyable, because then that company grew from being 60 people to being 3,000 people, and I wasn't just a team of one. I was the head of a department that had 16 people globally.
Right.
So it grew, but it grew organically over 10, 12 years. But you realize that if you are a small business and things are static, you don't have a lot of people leaving, you don't have a lot of people joining, you don't have a big, deployment of new software, and it is basically the same thing, day in, day out, with a few little, support issues here, new laptop periodically, new application, access to a file or whatever. You can run pretty lean. And I was pretty lean and efficient as the first IT support
Right.
person up until we had like 142 users. And then when you start to have more people joining and you have people leaving, then those things of deprovisioning accounts, securing accounts, creating, deploying laptops, refreshing laptops
So I want to call out
becomes
something that
time.
you've mentioned here, which is
Yep.
employee turnover. So like the
Yes. Yeah.
amount of employees turning over affected how much work you had.
Yes. Yeah. Because
Each
they
one of those
all
people
have
has to
touch
be
points.
issued something. Yeah, yeah. You're right. Every single
You have
person
to.
coming on and off has a touch point. You can't do that without interacting.
Yes. No. No. You've got to, on the plus side, you've got to give them a new laptop. You've got to order a new laptop, buy the new laptop, build it however you're building it. Hope, now things are a lot more streamlined if you're using Jamf or Intune. Back in the past, if you're doing images or physical installations of everything, it was a lot more labor
And so we've
intensive.
touched on something else too, which is the amount of automation you have in your environment.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So if you haven't invested in Intune, if you haven't paid for Jamf, please do.
Yeah, or
The
something that
investment in,
can get you to that place, right? Like,
yeah, there are other MDM applications out there. Do not be doing vanilla installs
yeah,
of unmanaged vanilla installs of something, and
because that stuff's going to come back
downloading all your
around to get you
applications.
too. Like, if your team grows and you have like a
Yeah.
2% a Linux environment happening that you have not managed up until that point, that's going to come back to get you.
Yeah, yeah. There's no centralized
Yeah.
patch
So when you're growing a
management.
team, you should think forward to these things and try to address them before they become problems.
Yeah, you should always think big from day one, because I
It's a
think
good
even if
soundbite
you're
for this episode.
small, yeah, cut that out, snip it, so it can be a YouTube short. Um, yeah, you are. Even if you join a company or you're starting your own company and you're 5 people, you should start off with an enterprise mindset from day one.
Absolutely.
Manage devices one way or the other, fully automate what you can do, because then things will scale very, very quickly, very easily. You'll have the processes in place so that when you do need to bring on other staff and grow your team, it will be a lot easier. You'll be able to be a lot more reactive to 0-day patches that need to be pushed out,
Yeah.
etc. And also when you're picking up new clients, and you can say, oh, these are already our established practices.
Yeah.
This is our security footprint. This is how we operate.
So we've said you need to know what you're supporting. You need to
Yep.
know how much automation you have in your environment.
Yep.
You need to know how much turnover there is in your environment.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly on the deprovisioning side, automate that,
Yeah.
securing those accounts.
What I guess
There's a
what
number
else
of
do we
tools
need
out
to
there.
know in order to try and assess how many people we should have? I would say
So the
ticket volume
other
is the big.
ticket volume. The other thing that we used to have back in the day was physical locations.
Oh, that's
So
true.
depending on the number of offices you had and the size of those offices and the complexity of the meeting room tech or other tech in those offices
Yeah.
would dictate how many people you would need to support that.
Have you ever had an office that did not have an on-site IT person?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and
So offices
they
can run themselves, right?
they can, and our magic number was about 50 people.
Ooh,
If
that's
an
high, I
office
think.
if an office got to more than 50 people, we would start to consider maybe we would start having the discussions between 40 and 50 people.
Really?
We would, and
Are you
depending on
flying people out to
how
the office though to like fix it up and
we used to periodically, yes, you would
okay.
do, yearly or twice yearly
Right. And
maintenance
obviously when
trips
the
where you'd
office
send.
opened, you would have somebody go out. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. But depending on, like, if you have really good automation
Yeah.
and
And really good
you just need a
monitoring of
laptop,
systems, right?
yes, you can work with the office manager. If it's like laptop just needs to be turned on and sign in as the new staff member, and then the magic of the internet and your MDM will
Yeah.
completely configure everything else, then you don't need to be having somebody manually building those
Mm-hmm.
laptops. I have spent many a year, an hour manually building laptops over Logmein or TeamViewer in remote
Oh my
locations,
gosh.
and it's
I think I would just
good.
build them wherever I am and then ship them fully built.
It's hard to be in London and then be building a laptop and shipping it to North
Oh, that's
America,
true.
because
That's
obviously
true.
all the other way around, because you have terrible problems with customs and import. It's very difficult, even if you're in North
Mm-hmm.
America,
And
shipping
then God
a
forbid
laptop
you
to
yeah,
Canada.
and God forbid you have to ship to like basically any other country besides the UK and the US and Canada.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. So
it's kind of a mess. Definitely global
yeah, so
logistics are a
physical.
problem.
Yeah, and I think we've said a number of times in the last couple of years, IT has transitioned. Our biggest problem hasn't been IT, because generally IT is
It's been
is easy to
logistics.
solve. It's the logistics about it. Certainly, when you have a distributed workforce. So
So yeah, so I
you
guess
know,
that's another factor is this sort of whether you're remote, hybrid, or on site, because that does change your experience. If you have no offices to support, you don't need people to support those offices, right? You can focus on how many end users you have and what their situation is. But if you have all offices to support, that's something you have to consider because networks need
yeah, and
rebooting and,
yeah, and you have the problems with corporate Wi-Fi that you need to be maintaining, and printers and other
yeah,
stuff,
meeting
and
rooms,
meeting
printers.
meeting room
When
AV.
are we going to get
But
rid of
like the
printers, Colin?
hybrid, I hope so, but some people still
I
use them,
know.
much to my annoyance.
Stop
I
using
know.
printers,
So
guys.
let's have a campaign. Let's have a change.org. Let's sign up and ban
That's got to be the
printers.
hashtag for this episode.
Um,
Stop using printers.
yes, and email attachments, but that's something else. Um, hybrid can be a strain on your IT department,
Yeah, because people's
because
focus is
if you
split.
have well, yeah, if you have nobody in the office Monday and Friday, but then 600 people in the office on Tuesday, you've got to have enough people on site on Tuesday to support potentially all of those
Mhm.
people turning up. And then also, if it rains and those people don't turn up, but you've gone in, then you feel like your IT staff are on site and all of your
It's a good day to get work
employees are
done
still,
when that
or
happens.
yeah, they're all still remote.
Yeah, well, and I
Um,
think too, there's some like stuff to consider, and I think we probably covered this a little bit in the hybrid remote on-site episode, but like,
mhm.
um, especially if you've got new office openings and you haven't been fully on site since the last office opened. Um, it can be hard to, I think, right size your bandwidth and stuff because you don't have the experience of that. And when you're a hybrid, I mean, it's just a roller coaster. Like, it really can be like there's like 5 people in the office one day and then 100 people in the office the next day. And like, it's hard to plan for that when you're not expecting it.
No, No,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, and certainly with meeting room availability and everything else,
yeah,
it
you can learn
it
a
can be
lot
a real
by like
challenge.
stress testing your office essentially by having a bunch of people come in.
Yeah, and also the one of the challenges that I've heard of is making sure that all of the tech in the office works perfectly when people are in the office,
Doesn't
because
it always seem like it breaks when
otherwise
somebody important comes in?
yeah, otherwise they're less likely to come in
Right.
and and carry on being remote, as opposed to being part of some organizations push to have people return
Right.
back into the office. So yeah, these are all this is why there isn't a magic
No.
formula
Yeah, you really have
of
to consider your
IT over.
needs. I would
Yeah.
say, Colin, there's another sort of factor that I've learned in my experience that makes a difference. And it's hard to measure because you can measure it with tickets, but in a stable
Hmm.
environment, in an otherwise stable environment, you may not be able to measure it properly. And that is sort of what the organization's response to stress is, technological stress in particular. So if you make a change, you could see increased support volume, right? And I have found that
Right.
that amount of increased support volume depends on how well your organization adapts to change.
Or plans for change.
Or
Yes,
yeah,
change
or plans
management.
for
Yeah.
change, right? And so like in I one time I was supporting a small organization that had like less than 45 users, and they were by far, whenever a change happened, we would see the most tickets from them. 45 people putting in the most tickets compared to the, I think, the broader, it was the merger and acquisition situation. So the broader 600 person org, most of the tickets would be coming
Hmm.
from these 45 people. And so I think that taught me a lot about how we, not only how we communicated change to them, but also like how stressed they were as an organization. Right. And when we started digging into that, we were like, oh, there's other things going on here. They're going through a lot of changes that have nothing to do with IT, but like we need to be sort of cognizant of that and aware of that because they're not going to respond well to even small changes from us. And it will cause a support
Right.
uptick. Right. So like it would be like all hands on deck after a change instead of
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
a normal volume, which is like, we've got our 5 support people and then the systems team gets to do their thing and the security team gets to do their thing, right? It was more like, no, everybody gets involved because they just didn't respond well. And it's hard to
Yeah. Yeah. You
quantify.
need to have. Yes, yeah. For those, certainly for those big changes, your IT team needs to be properly staffed, equipped,
Mm-hmm.
informed, and certainly if you're a managed service provider, being aware of what the company is doing or what you're doing in support of the company
Mm-hmm.
to make changes. But yeah, that's why you know smaller companies can do change management at the drop of a hat and not really think about it,
Mm-hmm. I've also seen
because
large
you
companies
can.
that have no change management either. And they just sort of like let everybody drown. If something
Yeah,
like doesn't get well timed. Um, or people ignore your change, right? They just choose to compartmentalize which one is important to them, um, which is also not
we
helpful.
and in larger orgs, or even in any reasonably sized organization, you do need to communicate your change to the entire business and other parts of IT function. Certainly, if you're fragmented,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not fragmented, siloed, separate, because something that you might be changing might impact, another part of the business that's also doing a change. That then is going to mean, somebody's change management process or upgrade is going to fail.
Right.
I've seen, unfortunately, that happen in large organizations that haven't communicated well.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
um,
So I guess going back to this like sort of idea of, how do we design a team that has the right number of people? I'm thinking that, you know, if I'm a new person walking into an org, um,
Hmm.
and I don't know that org, but I've been asked to sort of quantify how many people we should have, or um, assess whether or not we have the right number of people. Um, I guess the first thing I need to do is not really like sort of apply any formula to it or whatever. I need to listen and learn about the organization that I'm coming into.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and I was asked a very similar question at a conference that I was at. Sat down at one of these networking, lunch tables, and other guy saw my badge and asked what I did. And he's like, "Oh, I wonder if you could help me. I've recently taken on this role of an IT director and at a large company, and the CIO wants me to evaluate the service desk and work out how big should our support function actually be." And he said, how would you tackle that? How many people do you think we need? What's the ratio or the formula that we should use? And I was like, well, this is, really you've got to look at what your support personnel are doing, find out this is, how I would tackle it, find out what your support desk is spending most of their time doing, find that problem, solve that problem, and then go to the next highest, trouble ticket or support ticket that's coming in, or regular support ticket, find out what that problem is, solve that. Then once you've got rid of, what's causing most of
All
your
the low
support
hanging
tickets
fruit.
and
Yeah.
all the low hanging fruit, as they say, solve that. Then you'll have a better, more accurate look at what your support desk is actually dealing with that takes time. And then you'll be able to say, yes, these 10 people are enough, or no, we need to have, another 10. We've got to double the support desk. And I've heard another CIO at another company actually do that as well. When he started, the first thing he did was walk up to, he didn't go to the service desk manager. I think he took all of the first line support engineers out for lunch and said, what do you spend most of your time doing? And they're like, oh, the product we're supporting always has this problem, and we always have to talk to engineering about fixing it. He said, right, solved. I'll go to the CTO and we'll make sure that bug is fixed. And lo and behold, there's 10% of their week,
Right.
to give them back to them because they're not dealing with those low hanging, recurring problems. That would be the ratio that I would use, that everybody should be, looking
One thing that just
at
occurred to
doing.
me, Colin, is that in an organization where you do have some of those low hanging fruit, I think you have to be careful about how you present that to leadership, because they might say, well, if we fix this thing, we can get rid of someone. And
Yes,
that's
no,
mostly
it's
not
like,
the case, because really it's
no,
like you have gaps in your environment. Everybody has gaps, right? Things that they can't do because they don't have the
yep,
resources. And I think the important thing to remember is if you can solve that low hanging fruit, you now have time and more resources that you could potentially put towards
yes.
solving those gaps, right?
Yes, yeah. Help me fix this, and then I can do all of these other
Right.
things, which will be even better for the
Yeah.
organization.
And it can
So,
help your
yeah,
whole
that's
organization mature, and it can help your not it's not just about like your IT team maturing. In some cases, like I've seen the maturity of the IT team drive the maturity of the entire organization. And that's a
yeah.
really
Because
incredible,
also,
powerful thing.
all of those low hanging fruit trouble tickets, problem tickets, are an annoyance to the end
Oh,
users.
of course.
If
They
they
always
don't
are.
have if they don't have that annoyance, then they're going to be happier. So then, obviously, the employee surveys and everything else, and it spirals into
Mm-hmm.
a sea of happiness,
Yeah.
and everything is
Yeah,
better.
definitely start by
But
solving
yeah,
your little problems, and your little annoying common problems.
yeah, and a lot of them are are manageable,
Mm-hmm.
can be done
Yeah.
with cooperation with other parts of your
Sometimes just
organization,
somebody to
whether it
tell you
is
that it's a priority.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, and sometimes it's not known,
Mhm.
or it's overlooked because they're like, oh, we had just
Mhm.
assumed, somebody did that, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
talent HR, you need to let us know when somebody is going to start so that we can build their laptop in advance rather than them turning up on day one and not having a laptop.
And sometimes it's like
You
something
know,
feels common, but like you don't realize how common it is until you pull the numbers, right? So if
yep,
you can get into like classifying your tickets and tagging them properly and that kind of thing, um, then you can really pull some powerful analytics. And like if you don't have a good sense of what's going on, especially given depending on the size of your team, like sometimes it's really easy because you have a sort of a limited amount of data to work with, but like sometimes when things are like really big and chaotic, like you don't know. There's common problems, but then there's like really common problems and you just don't know because those feelings aren't very
yeah,
different on the day to day. But if you pull the analytics, it'll
yeah,
be like, well, there's a very clear trend here.
and this is why I was always against ticketing systems.
Yeah.
But this is why my tune has changed, regardless of the size of your organization, unless it's just you. But if there's like two, three, four, five of you supporting a relative, a couple of hundred people, I think it's still worthwhile having a ticketing system and logging stuff because you'll start to see
Mm-hmm.
trends. Because if you have three users reach out to three different support personnel about one issue, unless everybody's talking to each other all the time, they're not going to know that three people have had the same problem.
Right. They're going to
But
feel
if
like
you
one person
have
has had the
those,
same problem.
yeah, yeah. And so if you have those three people opening three tickets, even though you've got three support engineers dealing with those separate tickets, you and everybody else in your support team will see, oh, we've now got this recurring issue. It's either a big problem or it's localized. Is it something that we can fix?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, yeah. And that's why I would advocate. And there are a lot of good, economical ticketing systems out there. You don't have to go the whole, giant service now, all singing or dancing, bells and whistles. You could go for a lot smaller system. And I think that's a key thing when you're looking at the right size for your IT department. Get some of those functions in place.
Yeah. I think too, like I know like when I was a very early support technician, like it didn't occur to me all the time to raise those issues even when I saw that there was a trend, right? Or sometimes I didn't feel like comfortable doing it or I didn't know who I was supposed to raise it to. So
Yep.
like I think just to be fair to the sort of newer or younger or less experienced side of your team, like they may not always realize there's a problem, right? And so like by having a ticketing system and being able to sort of classify issues and like just taking a gander at that every now and then, you can sort
Yeah.
of point those things out to them, and then they can learn how to kind of raise those things.
Yeah. Well, we even talked about this ourselves when we were talking about SaaS
Mm-hmm.
outages, I think in a couple of weeks ago. If we notice something's wrong in an application that we've subscribed to, we should report it to that support department
Right.
so that they know about it. We can't always assume that somebody else is gonna raise the issue or they're gonna find the issue. But yeah, so it's the same for end
Mm-hmm.
users, and a lot of it goes down, to end user training, helping them
Yeah.
help themselves, asking them to, if they are going to raise a ticket with us, to give us, usable
Mm-hmm.
information. I get very annoyed when somebody opens a ticket and says, I've got a problem. Can somebody help me? It's like, well, actually detail what your
Can you
problem is,
tell
include
me
a
what the
screenshot.
problem is?
Can you tell? I have seen hundreds of
Yeah.
tickets like
Yeah.
that. It's like include a full screen screenshot. Reboot your laptop. Can it be replicated? Are other people having the
Right.
problem? Provide us as much information. Don't make it 20 questions. That
Yeah, because it just wastes
give
their
us.
time and ours. Yeah. So there's definitely
Yeah,
some
yeah,
like
and
end user training you can do with people. And I think we also have to enable our support people to kind of do that sort of training with them. Like
yeah,
um
yeah.
because
So
they can learn. Everybody can learn. It's
yes,
one of the
yeah, yeah,
magical things about being alive, I guess.
And on that note, I hope people have learned something from this episode
Sorry, there
of
wasn't a
SaaS
magical
Showdown.
answer for you guys about how to pick the
There
right
is,
size IT team, but like, I mean, you can develop that number for your own organization, right? And I think just
I would
be aware that it may change over time as your needs change.
yeah, and there is no small formula that could be used. There is no small
we just named
ratio.
like 6
It is,
factors in determining how many support
but
people you need.
I would love to write that out as a formula. Like, size of your IT team depends on, all of these things. And it would be a magical, hypothetical formula that would have to be created.
Yeah, but it would look more like a calculus equation.
It would. It would at least look like a very cool
we're
thing
technical
to have
people,
in your,
but we're not always
office
math
wall.
people. So like, let's not go there. Just understand that it's more complicated than the blogs would lead you to believe.
Yes. Yeah.
And
fix those low hanging fruit first.
There's definitely ways to make it easier on yourself. Definitely ways to make people more efficient. And then when you have people more efficient, you can use that time for other bigger, better things.
Yep. Like listening to the next episode of SaaS Showdown. Thank you very much, Rose, for joining us this week.
Helen.
I hope everybody had a great time.
That's a wrap.
Cheerio.
Produced by the Tab Geeks Network. Enjoy all of our shows on YouTube at youtube.com/tabgeeks. Join our exclusive, free, no sponsors allowed Slack community and sign up for our newsletter at tabgeeks.com.